It's California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz, and we are joined by Emily Wiley. She's a professor at the Keck Science Department, which is part of 3 colleges, the Claremont McKenna College, the Pitzer College, and the Scripps College. I've talked about that with some of your colleagues, that you're you're in 3 institutions. How does that work?
Well, it's a little wild.
Right.
We teach students from all 3 colleges, and so our students are a mix of those. Our classes are a mix of all students from those 3. How
did you get into science, into academia?
You know, growing up as a kid, I always loved working puzzles. I loved playing detective. I loved inventing things like new fragrances or itching powders. Trying to discover bones under the house. So I think I was naturally drawn to the thrill of discovering the sciences.
I have to ask you, and this isn't really the focus of our conversation, but we're probably around the same age, and I think it's fair to say that girls were not encouraged, you know, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s to be scientists.
I think that's absolutely true.
And so how did you wind up, you know, kind of going against the grain and becoming a professor of biology?
My parents never discouraged me, and I think I just really, I just loved discovering new things. I found it very, very thrilling, and science was a way I could do that. So I just never really looked back. I never thought too much about it, I guess.
Which is as it should be. Yeah. You are now looking to really change the way sciences are taught, which is why I wanted you to join us. When you think about college-level science, be it for majors or non-majors, you know, you're always in the lab. You know, it's like the gold standard. You're in the lab. But yet you have felt that being in the lab isn't really enough. Why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start by saying traditionally we've taught science by putting students in lecture courses and teaching them about discoveries that were made by other people. And they got very little chance to make their own discoveries. And I have to say, if you're ever at the point of actually making a new discovery, there's this moment where you say, I am the only person in the world who knows this right now. And that is really thrilling.
Oh, I can imagine.
So the laboratory part of the course, so many students have a laboratory practicum as part of their courses. But what they're typically doing is learning scientific methodologies and techniques by doing experiments that we already know the answers to. So they're missing out on the thrill of the discovery. So what I've been
devoting... Let me ask you, if I may, before we get to what you're doing, why has that been the standard? Why is it that for so many years, that's how we have taught?
When you are teaching large numbers of students, that is the most practical way to give technical experience, to provide that technical learning. So I think it's just hard to integrate open-ended real research questions, because they're always going to have to change with every new class or with every new student.
And so what are you looking to do? And you're doing it, actually.
Yeah, so the tricky part is really finding the good questions that lend themselves to involving large numbers of undergraduates in that process of discovery, which is what I hope to do. What I've been working on for the last 10 years. And so I and some colleagues at other universities across the country have found something that's worked well for us. I can elaborate a little bit.
And I want you to, because what you're looking to do is really create more minds focused on research, on discovery, because as you described to me before, that will happen in a graduate program.
Exactly.
But sometimes people, for whatever reason, don't pursue graduate degrees.
The large numbers of students won't ever get a real research experience until they get into graduate school. So they miss out on the best part of science, the thing that drew me in. Anyway.
Exactly.
So what we have done is we've identified a place where we can actually employ a lot of undergraduate hands. To make real contributions to the scientific body of knowledge.
Tell us. I love this stuff. I'm an amateur scientist, so be that as it may.
You've probably heard that by now we have sequenced thousands of genomes from different organisms. So we know the DNA sequence of all of these different genomes.
I'm obsessed with genetics. I mean, everyone who knows me knows that. Completely obsessed. Genetic genealogy is what I think about all day, every day.
So you know.
Exactly.
So now the hard work is really figuring out what all of that genetic information means. What does it do? What's its function? And this is stuff we've got to figure out. And we thought, what a great opportunity to involve the hundreds of undergraduate hands that we teach in the laboratory in this process of making new discoveries on gene information.
Just so we have a sense, how vast is the genome?
How vast is the genome? Well, I'll say
that's a tough question, sort of.
Well, yeah, 3 billion letters in us, but other genomes. So, but there are millions of pieces of gene information that have never been studied, and so these are millions of projects that millions of undergraduates could potentially get involved in.
So give us some examples of what these students are doing, and how do I sign up, even though I'm not in college now?
So what we've done is we've made some experimental modules that can be adopted by instructors at any university to employ in their classrooms with their large numbers of students. And the idea is that every individual student can adopt a piece of genetic information that's never been studied before.
So give us an example. I'm that guy.
Okay.
Give us an example, if you can.
Sure. So you're going to adopt a gene that has a number identifier. And what you will do is a series of experiments to try to see what that gene produces, where that product goes in the cell, where it works, what happens to the cell if you delete that information from the genome. So studying mutant cell lines and creating those.
And keep going.
Well, I was going to say, one part that I'm most excited about is we've developed a method for publishing those discoveries to the broader scientific community. So a student can go through a course and by the end of the course actually publish their discoveries. And then scientists access those from a really well-used site to then do further experiments. And
do you select the part of the genome that students will ultimately investigate?
Sometimes. In other classes we leave it open and they can adopt a piece of genetic information that they might be interested in for one reason or another.
Is it one gene? I know, my language isn't precise. Help me.
So, sorry, when I say genetic information, I am talking about genes.
So they adopt, like if it was human, there are 3 billion genes? Help me.
No, there are about 21,000
genes, so they could adopt one of those.
So they could adopt one of those, and they can adopt one from another organism that's been sequenced too. So it doesn't have to be just human genome centered.
Has any of these students discovered something remarkable, impactful?
I would say we have made some some very surprising discoveries. So
which is just as good.
Which is just as good. So the impact we'll see in the future, probably.
That's okay.
The true impact. But at this point, some surprising, unpredictable discoveries.
If you can, do you have a favorite you can tell us?
So one student was working on a gene that we thought would work in the cell nucleus, and instead it would go into the nucleus, and then when we tickled it with the cell with mutagens, it would fly out into the periphery of the cell, and so it was doing different jobs out there. So that's the kind of thing that we can discover.
That could help, I would assume, science one day. I mean,
so this is basic science. It's incremental. It's discoveries that get built on by subsequent scientific inquiries. But so we don't know exactly what's going to be done with that information yet.
So you have, I think, 12 institutions that have signed on?
12, and we just received funding from the National Science Foundation. They're interested in this because it's also been shown to greatly improve retention if students can get involved in authentic research early in their college career. And so the National Science Foundation is interested in having us try to expand this model and disseminate it more broadly to especially larger universities.
I'm blown away. Her name is Emily Wiley. She's a professor of biology at Keck, which is part of Claremont McKenna, Pitzer, and Scripps College. My name is Brad Pomeranz. It's California Edition.